And now, a show with inappropriate language, the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week, well, what the hell is going on? While a lot of us were excited for a 2021 that included a vaccine, new leadership, and getting back to how life used to be, that is not happening. What is happening is absolute pandemonium, and the country that for a long time was the greatest in the world is a complete and utter joke. I mean, love him or hate him, it's hard to argue that our sitting president is the sorest loser in the history of sore losers. And it makes us all look like a bunch of fucking idiots to the rest of the world. But that's so vain to say, like I'm worried about what other countries think about us. Because if I'm honest with myself, I used to look at news coverage of third world countries and they would have election issues and they would end with violence. And I would just think to myself, that's not what you do to your own country if you want to fix things. I mean, it all happened when the Black Lives Matter movement exploded. There was a ton of violence, a ton of looting. And yeah, they will grab headlines and they will raise awareness, but they aren't going to change policy. That happens in a civilized manner. Watching TV yesterday and seeing all these symbols being violated, literally symbols that I grew up miles away from, being violated on national TV for the whole world to see. We are that third world country that we have all seen before. But we are way worse over here. We are all fat on opiates and fast food. We are all ignorant to this virus, and we don't care about you. It's only about us. It's so sad and not the America I was raised to believe was great. But we can be that old America that everybody knows and loves. It's just going to take a ton of rebuilding. And I will say, for all of our bad, when we are healthy, when we have morals, when we are the America that everyone knows and loves, we are the best place in the entire world. And you've got to come here, but I would hold off for about 10 years if you're not from America, because like I said, we've got a lot of rebuilding to do, and hopefully that will be a dull time. Someone who is not dull at all is my guest this week. She's a groundbreaking skier who's a former U.S. ski teamer, a national champion, and one of the first women to make a difference outside of the race circuit. Kim Reichhelm is an absolute badass. I know her as an athlete from my days at K2. She was the alpha of the group who was always making sure that everyone was pushing themselves while having a good time. And Kim is all about having a good time. She's such a fun person, but she's done so much. And there are so many reasons why Kim shouldn't be where she is today. But at the same time, there are so many reasons why she should be where she is today. And before we get into all of that and get into Kim, I need to thank my sponsors for making this show happen. I'm talking about Weedmaps, Stanley, 10 Barrel, Elan Skis, Glade Optics, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. They make this show happen. I also want to thank you not only for listening, but for following me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, subscribing to the show, and reviewing me with 5 stars wherever you listen. Now, enough of that self-promotional crap. Let's talk to Kim Reichhelm. Holy shit, you are 60 years old now. That is pretty crazy to me. How old do you feel?
45. Except for my body.
Well, that's the thing is like you've lived with a shit ton of risk over the years, pretty much your whole life. Since you were 3 years old, you've been in risky situations. You've had to pay the price a lot of times over. In skiing, what is your injury list?
It's big. I'm actually currently in California about to get a stem cell injection in my back, because I had a spinal fusion of L3, L4 5 years ago, and now L4, 5 is starting to fall apart. So total, I have had 9 surgeries, 9 major orthopedic surgeries.
And that's over 40 years, though. So that's not, I guess, terrible, but I mean, that's a lot of injuries. Have they slowed you down? Like, is this latest back thing really starting to bother you, and that's why you're getting it taken care of?
Definitely, I live with pain. I have a very high pain tolerance, and it's just sort of something that I've come to learn to deal with. I bathe myself in CBD and Voltaren and anything else that I can get my hands on to try to maintain a level of tolerability. You know, it's funny, my last pretty bad injury, I dislocated my collarbone. And that was like a day I was skiing by myself. It was the first day I'd had off, and like 3 weeks, and it had just snowed 18 inches, and I dressed in black, and I put my head down, and I stayed in the singles line, and I didn't tell anybody that I was skiing. I just had the best day. I was just high as a kite on adrenaline and having the best time. And I just pushed the envelope too hard and ate it really bad and dislocated my collarbone severely and ended up having to have surgery to fix it the following summer. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm done. I need to stop getting my adrenaline rush from skiing. It's just way too dangerous. And I don't have the body that I used to have. I don't have the muscle mass and I don't have the strength that I used to have. I have the ability as a skier and I have the need to get the adrenaline rush, but I can't take the falls like I used to. So then I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm not going to get hurt anymore. And as soon as that happened, then the things started falling apart, like the back, and I just had my hip replaced. So I'm now not dealing with so much so injuries as I'm dealing with just body parts that are failing after all these years of abuse.
And speaking of just body parts failing or body failing or getting older, you had mentioned something to me the other day about writing a story about going through 2 years of menopause. And I haven't touched on that topic at all on my podcast because my podcast is not about menopause at all. But can you give me the short and easy version of that life?
Absolutely. And actually, I'm happy to share it because there's probably a lot of listeners that are in their 30s and 40s that will go through it. And if my experience helps them, then I'm stoked for that. I am writing a book right now. And the chapter actually that I just recently wrote was called Menopause, 2 Years of Crazy Town. And for me, menopause just really, I was totally unprepared and I got the rug pulled out from underneath me. And in a very short time period, I got hot flashes. I stopped getting my period. And the worst of all was I lost my confidence. Not only emotional confidence, but physical confidence. My ability to just paddle into big waves and know that I might not make the drop, or skiing steeper lines, or just my desire to push the envelope and not be afraid completely went away. I all of a sudden had fear like I'd never had before. And then I was emotionally unstable about the whole thing because I didn't know who I was anymore. All of a sudden I completely lost it. For example, jealousy. Like I've never been jealous about anything or anyone. And when I went through menopause, I became jealous of not only other women regarding my boyfriend, but lifestyles and people and just all these really strange emotions and instability mentally. One of the things that made me very aware of people that do have chemical imbalances and how difficult it is to live a normal life when you don't really have control over what your brain is doing and the way you're thinking and the way you're behaving. And I have a whole new respect for people that have these imbalances and really respect those that have dealt with it and gotten stronger. For advice, I want to just say the most important thing anybody can do is to get a baseline test. So when you're healthy and you're happy and you look in the mirror and you love that person that you see, you go and you get a test and you get your estrogen, your testosterone, and your progesterone tested. So then that's your baseline and that's how you know what you are when you're normal. Then when things start to go a little crazy, you can go to a doctor and get a test and that doctor can say, oh, your testosterone levels have just dropped 30% from what your normal baseline is. What you choose to do after that is up to you. Do you want to do bioidentical hormone replacement? Do you want to try to replace it through natural causes? Whatever your choice is, that's completely individual. But just at least knowing exactly what it is that you're missing and what your choices are to fix that makes you a lot more sane rather than saying, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I'm crying every single time I read the newspaper and it's the sports pages.
I mean, it just sounds so crazy to me because like your superpower is your supreme confidence, whether it's when you're skiing, whether you're surfing, or whether you're in a meeting, just giving your opinions and ideas. It's like you don't question anything. You kind of just move forward and you believe in what you believe. Like even when I think of like what Kim would look for in a guy, it's like you look for a dude who's 30 years old in perfect shape that you can get rid of in the morning so you can go lead your life and he won't weigh you down. And it sounds like that all disappeared in 2 years.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know you knew me that well. He's 37, by the way.
Okay. I didn't even know you had a boyfriend now.
But yeah, it's true. I've really lost myself. It was so extremely challenging to understand that and to come to grips with it and to Then, I do all bioidentical hormone replacement and I'm back to normal. I feel fantastic and I have my confidence back and I have my ability to take chances and to roll into a meeting and speak my mind and not be afraid of what somebody else is going to say or not be insecure about other people's successes. All that stuff. If I'm hormonally balanced, I'm a healthy, happy, positive person that's contributing to other people's lives as well as mine. And that's the person, obviously, that I want to be. The interesting thing about it, Mike, is that, you go through menopause when you're 50, and evolution hasn't really caught up with medicine. And it used to be that, you got married, or maybe you didn't get married, you had babies, you go through menopause, and then you die.
Right.
I've lived some of my best years in the last 10 years between 50 and 60. And without hormone replacement, I wouldn't be able to continue to live the kind of life that I'm living. And I certainly wouldn't have a boyfriend that's, over 20 years younger than me.
Well, that's crazy. But another thing that's crazy for you right now, I would think, is your work. You've been doing Ski with Kim for like 30 years, probably over 30 years, and people pay to go on trips with you, and you show them the best of everything, and you create a safe environment where you can be a guide, a best friend, a party goer. You can be everything because you have all those weapons in your back pocket. And now your business model of travel and other people kind of traveling with you, that's totally gone, I would think, with the virus going on. What's that like for you now?
It's really challenging. There's a part of me that just wants to throw in the towel and say, well, I'm just going to take the year off. I have a beautiful home in Baja and I can survive on pennies in Mexico and kite and surf and just lay low. But that's not who I am. And I do have clients out there that want to go skiing. I have responsibilities for K2 and research and development. I actually just booked a flight to go to Colorado to test skis for 3 days.
And you want to ski just as much as all the rest of these people do. It's not like you want to take the year off from skiing, I wouldn't think.
No, I definitely don't. But the cost is very high. The one thing that's fantastic about my business is that my business allows me to afford the lifestyle that I love. Without Ski with Kim, I can't afford to go heli skiing. I can't afford to live in Aspen. I can't afford to live in the mountains and ski and travel. So if I don't have that income, if I don't have enough clients to fund my fun, it doesn't make sense for me. So yes, I want to ski, but I'd be okay without it if it's going to cost me money.
Yeah, and I guess the worst case scenario for you is being at your villa or whatever, your property in Mexico, which every picture I see, it looks like another vacation. But before you had Mexico as a home base and you took most of your risks skiing, you lived your life in the U.S. and your first high-risk sport was riding a bike. And while you hurt yourself a lot of times along the way, and we talked about some injuries, getting your foot caught in the spokes of your bike when you were like 3 years old, I mean, that makes you a completely different person where you lose your big toe and there's a fear you might never be normal again.
I think it was more terrifying for my parents because, this was 1963. Not at a time where really they were able to sew limbs back on, especially when you're 3 years old. My big toe was, about the size of my pinky.
Right.
The doctor did tell my parents that I would walk with a limp for the rest of my life. I would have severe balance issues and I would not be very athletic. So, you don't really want to listen to all the naysayers out there in general. And for my parents, it was a little tough for them. But for me, I don't even remember it, Mike. I remember growing up without a big toe. And I remember when I was young being really embarrassed about it and always hiding it because little kids make such a big deal about things like that.
I feel like they made fun of you for that, but then you were also like dyslexic, and back then they didn't know what was going on with dyslexia. So they put you with a lot of the challenged people in school and you get made fun of there as well.
I did. I got called a retard. I don't mean to offend anybody, but back in that time period, there wasn't PC and, mentally handicapped or other terms that are a little bit more gentle. And I got taken out of reading class because I failed English and got put in reading class with the handicapped kids. And when I got escorted out of my homeroom, the mean kids would chant, "Retard, retard." It was pretty traumatic, or it should have been traumatic.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I ruled the playground. So all of my confidence came from my athletic ability, and Foursquare, Jungle Gym, kickball, you name it. I won. I was the captain. I got to pick the team, got to pick the sport. And I ruled when it came to sports and athletics. I could run faster and jump higher than everybody, all the boys and all the girls at that young age. And it didn't really bother me that the mentally handicapped kids in elementary school would come up to me and they loved me. They drool on me and hug me, and they thought I was the coolest, kindest, most wonderful person ever. And it's funny, I kind of really loved that they loved me. And because I had my confidence from the playground, I didn't care that the bullies and the mean kids made fun of me and called me retarded.
Did you ever get in fights or anything just to shut people up because you could?
No, I didn't need to. I didn't have that kind of anger. I just beat them in Foursquare, and that was enough.
All right. And I think another thing for you at an early age that you do is horseback riding. That's one of your big sports that you get into really young. Is it something that's serious where you're traveling a ton for horseback riding?
We traveled. My mom and I were a team. My mom was an incredible equestrian coach. She had a horse and I had a pony, and we traveled together, but mostly throughout New England. We would go, to Pennsylvania and New York and throughout Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont, but not everything within driving distance. I never got on an airplane to ride competitively. I never put my horse on a plane or had my horse trucked across the country. And
do people put horses on planes?
actually, I'm thinking about that. They must. The Europeans, when you have Olympics and things like that, those horses must have to get on some kind. I don't know the answer to that question, I'm sorry to say.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I would never fly a horse anywhere.
Well, you got to have some deep pockets for that stuff.
Yeah.
And, riding, as much as I loved riding, and something about being an equestrian that's unique to other sports is it's the only sport where you and the horse are performing athletically together.
Yeah.
The level of communication between you and the horse is like no other sport. And, I wanted to get into Grand Prix jumping where you're not being judged, but it's just a matter of how high and how fast. And because I was really a very good rider and very successful at a young age, that was the direction I was going. But I was also ski racing, and I had made the U.S. ski team when I was like 15 years old. And at that same time, I was, one of the top junior equestrians. And I kind of realized that it was one or the other at that point. And I knew that ski racing is a much cleaner sport than horseback riding in so many ways. But the money, let alone, is important. And having an animal, $100,000 or now $1 million horse, is necessary in order to be one of the best in the world, or several.
Well, at that point, you are in the ski race world. You're in the horseback world. You are in a total world of white people shit. It's all country clubs, ski clubs, horse clubs, maybe some sailing. I don't know. A whole ton of white privilege. Your dad crushes it on Wall Street, and I guess that goes in waves and cycles. But he does really well, which creates a ton of opportunity for you guys. And with skiing, it's like you have a home base in Connecticut, and then is it every weekend just driving to Stratton?
Yes. My dad, my dad's amazing, and my dad didn't grow up with a lot of means, so he really wanted to provide for his family, and lucky me.
Right.
There's no question that I appreciate every day the sacrifices that my dad made to provide for myself and my brothers. But yeah, every Friday, he would commute all the way home from Wall Street, and then the car would be loaded up, and we'd get in the car and drive 3 hours from Connecticut to Vermont, and skied every single weekend. And then Sunday after skiing, get in the car and drive back down, and we'd go to school and Dad would go back to work. And honestly, I just drove my parents crazy with skiing. I loved skiing more than any sport, and it would be pouring rain and nasty, and my whole family would be like, let's go home. And I'd be like, what? Are you kidding me? The snow's soft. There's no lift lines. Great out here. This is the best skiing we've had all season long, which was true. I really look back and go, the snow was all carvy and there was nobody around. And I remember putting garbage bags on inside my ski clothes because I still wanted to look cool. So I didn't want to have a garbage bag on the outside. So I'd get in the garbage bag and then somehow put my ski clothes on over the garbage bags so that I would stay dry but not look like a dork.
And eventually your parents get sick of that drive, I would think, and they have a second home up at Stratton. And today, the Stratton Mountain School is something that's talked about and revered, and there's been so many people that have gone through the doors. But your family pretty much creates Stratton Mountain School out of necessity of like, hey, we want to leave our kids with these teachers in our second home, and we will see them on the weekends.
True. My parents didn't really create it. There were other families, the Hellman family, Warren Hellman, the Tarnelli family, who had kids that were just a few years older than I am, 3-4 years older than I was at the time. And those kids were really the same thing. They lived in New York and Massachusetts and were driving to Vermont every weekend. And so those parents really started the ski tutorial program initially. And then my parents jumped in on it right away in the second year and donated our home to house all the women, as well as a coach and a teacher. And when I was 15, I started the winter tutorial program at Stratton Mountain School, which meant basically I got to stay in Vermont. But my dad and my brothers and my mom still drive back and forth.
They pretty much created the boarding school with some other families and then sent you there, but your brothers didn't go.
Right. Initially, my younger brother Todd was still really young. He was probably only like 12. My older brother took some time to really figure out that he wanted to be a ski racer. So in the beginning, he was sort of like, nah, not for me. I don't want to do this. And then eventually he sort of figured out that not driving back and forth every weekend would be a good call, and did start to really enjoy ski racing. Scott, actually, out of my family, was the most disciplined, but unfortunately the least naturally talented. And then Todd was the most talented, but by far the least disciplined. For me, I sort of had the combination of both, although I definitely could have used a little bit more discipline.
Now it's time for me to take a sponsor break, and my first sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. If you haven't noticed, 10 Barrel supports so much in the world of ski, snowboard, and bike. But another cool thing about 10 Barrel is that they also do so much out-of-the-box fun shit, like giving away old Army vehicles filled with beer and so much more. I could go on and on about the antics, the Pray for Snow Winter Ale, and the Profuse Juice Hazy IPA that I've been drinking a ton of, or how they give back to protect our winters and support so many important athletes and causes, but I don't have enough time. To find out more, head on over to 10barrel.com and you'll get all that info. And next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel. My next sponsor is Glade Optics. Headquartered in Colorado, they are the independent choice for goggles. Did you know that 9 out of 10 of the top brands in the goggle category are owned by parent companies? They are out to take your money and give it back to shareholders. Not Glade. Their goggles have the fit, function, and lens of a $300 corporate goggle without the big price tag. To me, they check the most important boxes. They look really good, and I tried them on a few different helmets, and they don't fog. From photochromatic lenses to magnetic interchange systems to storm lenses, it's definitely worth checking out Glade. It all comes at pricing that you aren't going to believe, and I'm going to get you 10% off that pricing. What you need to do is head on over to shopglade.com, pick out some goggles, and enter the code TPM10. That's all one word, all caps, and the number 10 to get that deal. My final sponsor in this break is Stanley, and they pretty much invented the category of containers that keep things hot and cold. And there is no other product on the market that comes close to doing this as well as what Stanley does. If you've owned a Stanley, you still have it and know exactly what I'm talking about. And this year, if you're a skier or a snowboarder and you're going to do the mountain right, you're going to have soups, coffee, hot chocolate, and you're going to keep that all in the car. And most likely, you don't have all the containers you're going to need to keep that stuff hot or cold. The good thing is, I'm going to make it easier than ever for you to save 30% when you're buying the amazing products from Stanley. And all you need to do is to head on over to stanley-pmi.com, go shopping, enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you'll get the deal and save 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. Based on our last talk, and I don't know if this is discipline related or not, but I feel like there was something to your life where you were always trying to prove something to your dad, or you just like maybe he wanted another boy and you were like the super talented athlete, but you weren't that boy he wanted, or there was always something where you were seeking his approval. Was there a dynamic like that in life, or is that just me like making things up?
No. You definitely have picked up on that. My dad was tough. He was, chauvinist is a little harsh of a word to use, but appropriate for the time. I just remember him when I was young, not really giving me the time of day. All of his life lessons were towards the boys. This is what you do. This is how you behave. This is, when you meet somebody and you look at them in the eye and you shake their hand and you say, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Powell." But it never was directed at me. All of that information, all those instructions, this is how you behave. This is how a man behaves. It was more like, "Don't you have some laundry to do?" Or one of my brothers would get up from the dinner table to clear his plate and he'd be like, "What are you doing?" Scott would say, "I'm clearing my plate." And he said, "That's woman's job. Kim, take Scott's plate."
Huh.
He was hardcore. And as he got older, he softened. But in those very young years, I really grew up trying desperately to make him proud of me. And I think I had to work especially hard because he just really didn't pay any attention to me. He was sort of like, "You're supposed to do laundry and clean the house and the dishes and clean."
But it's hard for him not to pay attention to you because by the time you're 13, I think you went to the Vermont State Championships, you entered 5 races, you won 5 races, you beat all the guys. And I'm sure there's a little bit of a buzz going around your name in ski racing at that point. I mean, he's got to take a little notice, I would think.
At that point, everything had changed. So the stories I'm telling you are more like from the time I can remember until I really started becoming a better athlete. And then not only did he realize that he could not slow me down no matter what, he also started to recognize that I can mow the lawn and clean the garage just as well as my brothers can, and I'm kicking ass ski racing, so he better get involved in helping raise me in a positive way, or else there are negative influences out there in all types.
And have you used ski racing to kind of build your confidence? Because while you're being teased and stuff when you were a kid, I would think once you're the best in ski racing and everybody's talking about you, your confidence goes to another level. Does it change you at all?
I don't think so. I think that I always wanted more. I was never satisfied. Just, whatever I won, I expected to win. I wanted to win. I had the goal of winning. I've always been a very goal-oriented person. So the successes that I had planned on them and I had worked for them and made sacrifices to get those successes. So that being said, when I didn't win, I wasn't devastated. I didn't go off crying. I just realized that I had either made a mistake or I hadn't trained hard enough, or that's life. You don't get to win every single time you step in the starting gate. But I was always very confident and I could take a hit. And that's another thing about my dad. He was the beat down guy. He would embarrass us all the time. So you got kind of tough skin. You got used to just taking it, and that it didn't really matter. You don't let little things like that bother you. You keep your eye on the ball and keep moving forward and keep looking forward to what's next and how you're going to get there, and not dwell on the past or anything that hasn't worked out for you.
And what's next for you is huge. By the time you're 16, 15, 16, you make the U.S. ski team. How does that even happen at that age?
You win a lot of races.
Yeah. I mean, is it a development team that you're on? Is it like the C team, the B team?
Exactly. No, when I was 15, the development team didn't quite exist yet. It was called the talent squad. So the talent squad soon became the D team, the development team. So I was sort of a part of the talent squad when I was 15 and got invited to my first U.S. ski team camp. I think it was at Mount Hood. I remember playing round robin ping pong with Phil and Steve Mayer, and I know that I was the youngest kid there. But that was sort of the beginning of my time with the U.S. ski team. And honestly, I was on and off and skiing with a team throughout that 5 years of time. But I don't consider the development team really, especially now that I'm older and look back, I wasn't really officially a member of the ski team until you're in a uniform and traveling and racing Can-Ams, Europa Cup, World Cup. So for the first couple of years, I was just a part of the development program.
But eventually you get on that team and start racing all over the world, right?
Yes.
And the difference between the U.S. ski team and what's going on at Stratton Mountain is the U.S. team, when you get on it, it's not organized like the Stratton Mountain School. From the leadership to the coaches, everything seems to be worse on the national level for some reason. What are the problems there?
Well, it's super challenging because I came from one of the best ski academies in the country, where I would sit down with my coach in the beginning of the season and say, okay, what do you want? What are your goals? When do you want to peak? What's the most important race of the season? How do you want to do? And how can I, as your coach, help you reach your fullest potential as an athlete? And it was a very, very high caliber program where they worked closely with the best athletes to make sure that we were making commitments to ourselves and to our coaches. And that way, when we slacked off, they could come back to us and say, wait a minute, you made this commitment. Now get your ass out of bed and start training now.
Right.
But it brings it back to you. It's on you. And I thrived off of that kind of leadership. And when I made the US ski team, there wasn't the best coaches. There was no motivation. They created a lot of competition within the team itself. So now I'm traveling in Europe and you can't speak any foreign languages and I don't have any friends. And now the few friends that I did have that I'd grown up ski racing with aren't my friends anymore because we're competing against one another to win a spot at the next race. And I really struggled with the lack of leadership, the lack of camaraderie. I struggled with the lack of respect from myself as an athlete. I didn't really feel like the coaches cared about me as a person or wanted to motivate me to see me do well. I felt like all they cared about was themselves, their uniform, their radio, how cool they were, and even at times belittling us in front of other coaches in a way to make themselves feel better. And I didn't deal with that very well at all.
Well, you're a strong woman. Like, from what I know, you don't just sit back and take shit. You let your opinion be known. So I'm guessing at the 17 to 19-year-old version of you, to someone that you don't respect, do you let that opinion be known to them in maybe not the best way?
Yeah.
Kind of like fuck authority. You guys have no idea what you're doing.
Kind of, yeah. But you certainly don't know what's best for me, and you've proven that. And I'm not going to let you force me to run downhill when I'm not prepared just because you want me to run downhill. That's not part of my plan yet. Maybe I'll run downhill a couple years when I'm a little bit bigger and have more experience. But right now I'm a slalom and GS skier and I'm not going to run downhill. And they would be like, you'll do what we tell you to do, whether you like it or not. And I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm not going to let you ruin me or get me injured when I'm trying to have plans to make the Olympics in 2 years.
So you get kicked off the U.S. team for being uncoachable. Thinking back there, what are some examples of you being uncoachable?
Well, I kind of just touched on it right there.
It was just that one incident, though?
It really was that one incident. I mean, there was definitely times when I spoke out in meetings and things like that that got me in trouble. One time we had this big summer camp. We were at Squaw Valley when the Olympic Training Center still existed. And we had some psychological coach there talking about motivation, teamwork, and camaraderie. And I raised my hand. I said, well, what if you don't respect your coach? And this guy who's a complete, I mean, the worst question that he asked next was, do you respect blah, blah, blah? This one person that was the development organizer. He wasn't even a coach. He was hired to run the development program, not as a coach, but as a director. But he kept trying to coach us and he didn't know what he was doing. And I couldn't stand it because I'm like, you're the director, not the coach. You can't even ski.
Right.
So I hesitated. He said, do you respect Doug Smith? And I hesitated and the whole room burst out laughing. I mean, we're talking like 30 athletes burst out laughing because I was speaking for everybody. And I recovered by saying, I respect Doug Smith as an organizer of the development program, but not as a technical coach. But it was too late. And I had another coach tell me that year that I basically screwed myself over by making that statement. And that particular coach hated me and was going to do everything he could to keep me from succeeding. But that's what I mean. Like, there were egos involved in the team. And my story is a dime a dozen. There's so many great athletes that didn't reach their fullest potential because of the politics of the U.S. ski team. And I didn't reach my fullest potential because of politics, but also because I spoke out against those politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing when you speak out against a group of your peers so you can let your opinion be known. But when you're speaking out against someone who can punish you, it's a totally different story. And you definitely were hurt there because there's still a chance for you to make the Olympic team, I feel like. But politics do come into play and you're the odd woman left out. And like, do you feel cheated by like the country?
Totally. I mean, not anymore. I mean, it's long past, and I was able to make up for it in my career as a skier. And I'm very, very passionate about what I'm doing now and happy with the successes that I've had. But I believe that I was a good enough ski racer to race in the Olympics and race at a world-class level and the first seed in the world. And I didn't even come close to getting there because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. And I don't do well with misguided authority. And I have a very hard time sitting back in any situation with people making decisions about other people's lives when they really don't know what they're talking about.
I feel like more of that comes into play because pretty much the U.S. team at this point tells you there's no chance you're going to go to the games. You're not going to make the U.S. team again. It's time for you to go to college. So your dad's like, college, cool. I'll pay for it. Just come home. I'll pay for it and everything will be great. And your Kim Reichhelm was like, no one's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to Colorado. I'm going to get a scholarship. You do that and you end up going to Colorado. But to me, is there any motivation to win when you're at the University of Colorado, especially when you get there after you've left the U.S. ski team, which is like your dream to make the Olympics, and now it's almost like a step down racing on the collegiate level?
You know, actually, when I first got to college, I wasn't even planning on racing on the collegiate level. I was planning on getting back on the U.S. team. I mean, I was ranked one of the best skiers in the country from a FIS point standpoint. And the only reason why I wasn't on the team was because I was told no. So I went to college with the intent of skiing myself back on the ski team. So the fall that I was there as a freshman, I worked out really hard. I was very, very focused. I was all about, getting in shape and skiing and training as hard as I could so that once I started racing FIS, which we still do in college, I would have enough success that the ski team would have to put me back on the team. Which I did. We went to the Holiday Classics in Sun Valley. I podiumed like every single race. Out of 5 races, I podiumed every race. And then I went to my coach and I said, so who's going to Europe? And he said, oh, we're not taking anyone older than Noelle Lyons. And Noelle was 18 and I was 19, or she was 17 and I was 18. And so they based their criteria on age. And that was the Murault thing. Murault really wanted to come in and clean house and get rid of anybody that was a bad egg and bring in a whole new, young, fresh group of athletes that lived under the Murault rule.
Okay.
And that was the same for athletes and coaches.
So there's a lost generation, which you were part of?
Yeah, a little bit. And there's a lot of people, Mark Taché, Dave Stapleton, Scott Hoffman. There's a lot of athletes that got caught in that. I mean, there's several athletes that should have competed in the Olympics in 1984 and didn't get to compete because Murault didn't let them. Like, they qualified. They were one of the best 4 in the U.S. to represent the U.S. in the Olympics, and the U.S. didn't fill the quota.
That's such bullshit.
We left empty seats at Sarajevo because Murault said anybody that doesn't score World Cup points will not race in the Olympics. So in the end, we left seats empty.
People's careers were just ruined because of executive's decision.
Yeah.
Which happens all the time, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And, to Murault's credit, he did produce an incredibly strong team. Phil and Steve Mayer. I mean, Bill Johnson's a perfect example. He got caught in the fray. He got dumped from the ski team because Murault didn't like him, and he went and got a lawyer. And the lawyer went to the U.S. team. I didn't learn about this until many years later, but the lawyer went to the U.S. ski team and said, this is the best downhiller in the country, and you can't tell him he can't race just because you don't like him.
Right.
And so that was before Bill won the gold in Sarajevo. He got reinstated to the U.S. team because he got a lawyer who put him back on the team.
That is crazy and amazing that he was able to prove his point.
Yeah, I love that story. They hated him. I mean, Bill was a unique person, but he was a world-class ski racer, and he was able to come back and stick it to him, which I thought was great.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's always great to see someone stick it to the man and win. Now it's time for me to take another sponsor break, and next up is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. If you don't know Peter Glenn, well, they started in Vermont over 60 years ago when retail was king, and they've been the brand that has helped build skiing and snowboarding on the East Coast forever. They still have that retail element, but now everyone can shop at Peter Glenn because they also play against the big internet brands too. And guess what? They'll price match the big guys, offer free shipping on orders over $49, and have great deals on the best brands. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. My last sponsor in this sponsor break is my first ever ski sponsor, Elan Skis. They make handcrafted skis in Slovenia's Julian Alps, and they have a serious history, like 75 years of history. Seriously, this is their 75th anniversary of making world-class skis with innovative technology that makes skiing better for everyone. And with Elan, it's all about experience, and they are as authentic as it gets. Whether you're heading out on a backcountry adventure with your bros, on a trip to the local hill with your family, or enjoying après with your friends, the experience is what matters. And with Elan, that experience is always good times. You can find out more about the Ripstick, which I'm currently skiing on and loving, Glen Plake, and everything else Elan over at elanskis.com. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. So with you, it did seem like there was some negative energy probably when you didn't make the U.S. team, and then after that, were you not as focused as you should be for a little while on ski racing, and then that all changes and CU wins the national championship? Because it seemed like there was like a down period, and then something flipped, and you guys started killing it.
Yeah, I was pretty dysfunctional after that. After the ski team didn't take me back, I was so angry and really deserved to be on the U.S. ski team. And now I'm stuck in college. I hadn't studied at all, so I was about ready to flunk out of school. My first semester, I had a grade point 175.
Whoa.
I was in bad shape, and I didn't really care. You know, I had a huge chip on my shoulder. I didn't care about my teammates. I didn't care about my coach. I started smoking a ton of pot. I was just kind of like, fuck you guys. And it was a horrible way for me to be, but it was probably my least proud moment as an athlete. I was a leader, which I didn't really realize what a powerful leader I was, but I was a leader in a negative way. And every time things didn't go my way, I'd just pull my card and go, I'm done. I'm out. See you later. You guys fuck off. I'm not doing this. And the other girls would follow me. And I didn't realize how destructive it was until by the end of my second season, my sophomore year, we were the worst team in the NCAA.
And it's the University of Colorado, like you should be somewhere in the top.
Yeah, exactly. And we had just gone through Title IX and funding was really minimal. And the men were all, Marolt's leftovers who, were eating steak and staying in hotel rooms. And the girls were eating peanut butter and jelly and living on friends' floors. And there was a lot of indifference there. And it wasn't a really positive thing for any of us. And we weren't happy. We hated our coach. I ended up getting our coach fired. And then that's when things started changing, was once we got our coach fired, the head coach gave us a budget to hire a new coach and said, you bitches hire your own coach. I don't want to hear from you again. And I then became proactive about finding a coach. And it was really important to me to find a coach that cared about us personally. We were great ski racers. There's Tianya Tutt and Mary Beth Andre, and all three of us had been on the U.S. ski team together. We were great ski racers and great athletes. We just didn't have direction. And we knew we needed a coach that would bring us together and care about us on the hill, off the hill, be there for us, bring us together as a team. And the cross country team was sort of in the same situation. And so at that point, towards the end of my sophomore year, I was really like, I want to solve this problem. I don't want to be the worst team in the NCAA, and I don't want to be miserable, and I don't want to be this distraught group of women with no leadership. And that really changed everything. It changed me. It changed the way I approached things. I realized that I needed to help solve the problem and not be a part of the problem. And we hired Paul Major to be our coach, and Paul got together with Alan Ashley, who became the cross-country coach, who both went on to be U.S. ski team coaches for many, many, many years afterwards. And we went from, the worst team in the NCAA to winning the national championships in my junior year. So, it's a long, long story about the process, but more than anything, the personal growth for me, learning to care about somebody more than myself and to give back and to make sacrifices, and how incredibly powerful that experience was. And truly, what I do now with Ski with Kim, with Women's Ski Adventures, my guiding, a little bit of mentoring kind of thing with my clients and other athletes, I am the person I am today because of what happened then at CU.
And I think if you look at it with your business and everything, it all starts at the top. When you have someone like yourself, or you have those coaches that you're talking about that can kind of change the game internally, and you have that leadership that people believe in, then it makes it easy to want to be part of a successful team. But when there's no respect for the people above you, it's like, fuck those guys. I don't want to play at all, and they're part of the game. But you end up turning that whole thing around. Another thing you do a lot of in college is keep busy, because while you're there, you intern with Head and Tyrolia. And is this like a paid thing? Is this how you're making money through school, is to intern? Or is this just something you're doing for just knowledge?
Well, I knew that after racing in college, I was going to race professionally. And so I really started focusing my energies in studying towards understanding the ski industry, marketing, promotion, advertising, even management in the ski industry. And Head Reichhelm Tyrolia at the time was putting more money into pro racing than any other company. And I was sponsored by Rossignol and Lang. And I went to Danielle Monet at Rossignol and I said, I'm going to race pro after college. And he said, you're on your own. I'll give you a couple pairs of skis, but there's no money. There's no opportunity for you to make any money. We're not involved in pro racing. So whatever you do is fine with me. So I started doing research to figure out where was the money. And it was Head Reichhelm Tyrolia. So I started really working with that company. First thing I did was make sure I could ski on the boots, because I knew the boots being the most important piece of equipment, that if I couldn't ski on Reichhelm's, then I couldn't work with that company.
Right.
So I switched to Reichhelm's and I loved the boots. And so that was the beginning. And from that point on, I really focused, my energies in class and my internships with Head Reichhelm Tyrolia. And there was another company I worked with, Nils Ski Wear. I went to the SIA show that then was in Las Vegas and helped with them in every way, from sales. I was a model. I was a runner. I'd get them coffee. I would do anything, just sort of so stoked to be at SIA and involved in the industry at that age.
And another really smart thing you did, probably the smartest thing you did in your whole career, and I don't know if this happens during college or after college, but you take an acting class. And by taking that class, you got comfortable speaking in front of cameras, and you were always the person wherever you were in life that people could go to for a soundbite and knew they would get something good. Was that another calculated decision of like, hey, this is how I'm going to make my future work?
It was. It's so funny. I mean, when I think back on it, and you're right, it was one of the smartest things I did at that time in my career. But I got credit in college for negotiating my contract with Head Reichhelm Tyrolia. And the contract was heavily weighted towards exposure on ESPN. And at the time, ESPN was just a station that nobody even had heard of.
Right.
But Anheuser-Busch was the sponsor of the Women's Pro Tour.
And what is this tour? Because it's not the Mogul Tour. I mean, this is straight up racing gates.
Right. This is head-to-head racing, Bob Biatti World Pro Ski Racing, dual format, 2 huge 6-foot drops, banners, announcers, and it's set up in a ladder. So they eliminate to 16 athletes through timed runs.
Okay.
And then the fastest person races the slowest person. And it's set up in a ladder. And every time you win 2 runs, so the clock, it's a dead horse start. Both people start, there's a big gate at the top and the starter says, course is clear, racers ready. And then a horn goes off and the gates open any random time. So, charge out of the gate, ski down. The clock starts when the first person crosses the finish line, stops when the second person crosses the finish line.
Huh.
You go back up, switch courses, and race again. And the winner that advances is the one that won the differential between the 2 runs.
Interesting.
So you race 10 runs to win the race. You only have to beat the person you're racing against. And every time you advance, you're advancing to the next round.
Who are the big names on the tour?
You know who was one of the biggest names was Terrell Forland, who was Norwegian. Now Lampert's mom. David Lampert and Terrell Lampert are Henrik Lampert's parents.
Huh.
Yeah. So his mother was the rock star. She was the winningest pro ski racer of all time and the girl to beat.
How much money could you make on that tour? Could you earn a living being on it?
Well, when you're fresh out of college, you could. And my contract with Head Reichhelm Tyrolia was amazing. So after my rookie year, I think I got something like a $12,000 bonus just for TV exposure alone.
Wow.
So I made money at every race. Every time you podium, you're making between $1,000 and $5,000 if you podium. And then you have victory bonuses from your sponsors if you negotiated your contract well. And then you have television and print exposure on top of that. So the fact that I went to college and studied marketing and took this acting class all compounded for me. Because even when I was a rookie, The first couple of races, I wasn't podium, but I'd go put on like a pink CB Sports one-piece suit, which actually no skiers so would be caught dead in, and come back out and ski around and cheer on my other racers who had continued to, make it to the next round. And, the producer would be like, oh, look at Reichhelm. Let's interview her. She's got a cute little pink outfit and a fur headband. And then I would be articulate. Then I would talk about something that the viewer could relate to, say something that made them understand what it was that we were going through that was more tangible for a viewer. And that's what I learned in the acting class, was not only how to have camera presence, but how to make things interesting. My goal was to keep somebody from changing the channel. What can I say that will make them more interested in what we're watching? Not just talk about the race and the snow conditions and how fast we're going and how dangerous it is, but relate it to something in life that somebody can say, oh, wow, I get it. I understand that. I'm going to keep watching this race now.
So within a few years, you step down from racing and you actually take a job behind the mic, which is like you get all the benefits of the racers. You don't have to perform at all, and you're guaranteed a check, which is an amazing thing. But at the same time, you're one of those people that have always had something to motivate you. Well, you had racing to motivate you your whole life. Now you really don't have anything, and you need something to challenge yourself. And I'm guessing that's why you end up in Tahoe, because the terrain and the skiers there are going to push you. And to get in with the cool kids, I feel like in Tahoe, you do what every kid does and just find the cool kids and chase them around the mountain until they invite you to ski with them.
Exactly. It's so funny. I remember it very well, being at Squaw Valley, and it was my first race where I wasn't racing. And I'm riding up the chairlift and I'm looking down at the gates at everybody training. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't have to train. It's like the first time since I can remember that I didn't have to run gates and train and practice to be a ski racer. I don't have any responsibilities at all. So instead of looking down at the gates, I started looking up at the mountain and looking around and going, wow, I wonder how those guys got there. And what about this? So I just sort of went off and was exploring and started riding this one head wall chair at Squaw. And I saw a pack of guys who were all really good skiers. And I sort of started watching where they were going. And then I positioned myself so that I was just getting on the chair at the same time they were getting on the chair, and befriended them. It ended up being the Egan brothers and the Delorier brothers.
Good crew to run into.
And I said I wanted to know if I could ski with them. And we got to the top, and I think it was Rob Delorier said, hey guys, this chick wants to know if she can ski with us. They all kind of laugh at me. I'm still in racing clothes, and we're all on skinny skis back then. But,
right.
They could tell I had, I was skiing on a, 195 slalom race ski, and clearly had my kit together. So the first thing they do is click out of their bindings so their skis on their shoulder and start walking up the ridge. I'm like, oh, okay. So we walk up this ridge, they get to the top, I think they're trying to freak me out. So we stand up at the top of this cornice and they're kind of pointing where to go and talking about who's going to go. And then I just go. I just drop the cornice, ski down, get to the flat, stop. They all ski down to me, high five me, and tell me that I can hang out with them for the rest of the day. And that was the beginning of my big mountain skiing career.
Are you living in Tahoe at that point?
Where was I living?
You're kind of Peter Pan. You live everywhere, I feel like. You don't have a residence in the U.S. You have a place in Mexico, and you crash wherever you want. Sometimes it's Aspen, sometimes it's Tahoe. It just depends on the year.
Yeah, I do. I move around quite a bit. The other thing is, I was laughing about this with somebody the other day. Every time I break up with a dude, I move. I never stay in the same town. I just want a fresh start. I don't want to see him dating other girls. I don't want anybody living in the house I used to live in. So yeah, I'm not afraid of moving. I love change. I love staying on the go. And I feel that I've lived in a lot of really great mountain towns.
Back then at that era, has Blizzard blown up yet at that point?
Just about. It was probably the following season, let's see, it was 86, 87. I bumped into Stump's crew. Actually, Greg Stump wasn't there. Bruce Benedict was there. And he was shooting Schmidt and Plake and Slattery and Tom Day filming Blizzard. So that would have been in 1988. Because that movie came out in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
So Bruce and I are old friends. I did some photography work with him when I was living in Boulder. And I met the crew when they were shooting Blizzard of Oz. then. I didn't film with them. I just sort of hung out with them. But then the following year, Greg Stump came back to Squaw Valley. That was 1989 that we shot License to Thrill.
And does your TV training prepare you at all for filming? Because you're not used to the hurry up and wait, I would think, that filming is, especially back then with the gear that they're using. So was it a big challenge just to like sit and have to wait forever for Stump to figure out his film and his camera and then turn it on whenever he said go?
Yeah, it was really challenging for me. And I really did not do well filming. I didn't like it. I mean, I'm only in a few films. And for that reason, I just hated the standing around. I hated the waiting. I hated the hours and hours of sitting in some RV in Thompson Pass waiting for the weather to clear. It just wasn't my thing. I had already started Women's Ski Adventures at that time and really was focused on putting my energies into creating great experiences for other people. All the high energy I'd gotten from college and learning about giving back and caring for others and sharing my knowledge. That's where my passion and my energy was. And I hated filming. I just couldn't stand it. And I only did it absolutely when it was necessary.
I mean, it's kind of a dual-edged sword for you because in one respect, being in those films definitely gave you, people know you all over the world from those films. They don't know you from the little ski races that you were doing that I had to ask you what they were because I think of mogul contests.
Right.
They know you from the Greg Stump movies, which is amazing. But then the one clip that so many people know you from is hitting a tree, and that's got to bum you out because like you do Letterman and that's like what he's going to show. And it's like, you don't want your career to be defined by hitting a tree in one of your 4 movies that you were in. But does that bum you out every time someone brings that up or you have to see it?
It's not my favorite. Yeah.
Well, we won't talk about it anymore then. But you know what being in the movies does for you? It does establish your reputation as being at that point an extreme skier because that's what people were talking about. And you were invited to be part of the world's first extreme skiing championships in Alaska in 91. And how does that whole thing come together?
That was amazing. And you're right. If it weren't for being in License to Thrill, I would not have been invited to Alaska in 91. And that was a game changer for me and a lot of us. I mean, Coombs, Conway, Cumming. I mean, so many athletes that were there for the first time.
Legends, all of them.
Yeah. And honestly, that first year, 1991, was like a festival. It wasn't even like a competition. But when I got invited, my co-dad said, hey, we're running this event in Alaska. It's going to be an extreme skiing contest, blah, blah, blah. It's $500. We'll pay for your room, your meals, and your heli skiing. Just come on up and be a part of this. I mean, I didn't have to think twice. I was like, this sounds amazing. It sounds like a blast, such a unique and great experience. Why would I say no? And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. There was only 3 women that were up there, and the other 2 were Alaskans. And I didn't even think I was going to get a trophy for winning that contest because it was more just like a festival. And really, the trophy that Doug Coombs got was like a hockey trophy. It was taller than he was. It was massive.
Right.
I got this tiny little trophy, and it was like great because I could put my trophy in my duffel bag.
Well, years later, you end up winning the Worlds. You come back, it's like you win the U.S. Extremes, you win like the South American Extremes and the World Extremes. The U.S. Extremes was in Crested Butte, you win that one. But back then, between Squaw, which I think you've lived at, or Tahoe, which you've lived at, and Crested Butte, it's known from some of the more gnarlier terrain in the U.S. resort-wise. And when you move from Tahoe to Crested Butte, what's the big difference between the terrain and the people? Is it something that's noticeable, or do you just move there to get away from a guy?
Yes. It's pretty different. In one sense, no matter where I live, whatever ski town I live in, including Aspen, I have a tendency to hang out with the best skiers, the instructors, the patrollers, the guides. My core people are a lot of the times the same core people no matter where I live. So in that sense, it's the same. I'm hanging out with just a bunch of passionate ski junkies.
Right.
It was a little bit less of a scene in Crested Butte than in Squaw. Squaw Valley already had a reputation, had the Palisades, had guys like Steve McKinney, Scott Schmidt, guys that had been in movies and created some reputation for themselves. And there was a little bit more of a bro-bra, check me out scene in Squaw Valley than there was in Crested Butte.
Yep.
Crested Butte was more like, there was 20 telemark skiers on the mountain that ski better than every big mountain skier on the mountain. And
Right.
nobody talked about it. So I liked that. I liked the chill scene. I liked the fact that every time I turned around, the next person ripped harder than the one before them. And they weren't sitting around the bar bragging about how rad they were.
And I would think, too, you're kind of getting a little older at this point, too. You're like 35, 36 by the time you go there. So you're probably done with like the 20-year-old guy bragging at the bar, like you say.
Agreed. Yeah.
Now, we could go on and on about K2 women's development and all of that stuff, but I'm not going to. I'm going to ask one more question that I'll hopefully get a good answer for, and then I'm going to jump into my final segment of the show. But you're a woman in a male-dominated industry, and you've been at the top of the food chain athlete-wise. And I always want to know if it's an equal playing field between men and women. So in kind of thinking about it, I was thinking about what athletes of your time were you kind of comparable to? And I would say, you know, Plake would probably be the top of the food chain along with Schmidt, so maybe not. But like you and Hatrip, I would think, would be on the same level of still A-list pro skier at that point. Not quite Schmidt or Plake, but who makes more money at that point based on their pro career, you or Hatrip? Is there a difference because of gender?
Yes, huge.
You weren't able to do very well as a pro skier compared to maybe how he was able to do?
Not when it comes to contracts from companies. It's night and day.
It's obviously got to be something that bothers you, but what do you do about that as an athlete at that time? Do you not say anything to not rock the boat?
That's the thing, is you can't say anything. I mean, you were at K2 back in the day. You know what some of the numbers were. There's nothing you can do. The second I went to K2 and complained about it not being fair, I would have been gone.
I could see that.
I don't want to say specifically K2, any company. You take what you can get and you be thankful for it and you do your job, and that's the way it is. The second, this is at least how I felt. I felt like the second I complained about things not being fair, then there'd be somebody in there to take my spot in 2 seconds and I'd be gone. And complaining about it and fighting is just not going to help.
But do you think if Mike Hatrip were to, and I'm just using him as an example, he doesn't really play into any of this at all, but like if he were to complain about something, someone gave him an offer and he's like, no, I want more, he probably wouldn't be at risk of losing his job. It would be a negotiation.
Correct.
So that's kind of where the difference is like if you complain, you're gone, but men can complain and get more.
Absolutely. We don't even need to get into it. That's exactly how it was.
Okay.
But you know what? Right now, I'm paid by K2 more than I've ever been paid by K2. And they value me and support me. And I've been with K2 for over 30 years. And I'm glad I never complained because I love working for the company and it's all come back around. And it's been fun. It's been fun learning from everybody and sharing. And I love being a part of that team because I am independent. I spend a lot of time on my own, doing my own thing. I don't work for a company. So sometimes I miss out on those opportunities that you learn from others, the powwows and the meetings and the idea sharing. So being a part of the K2 team, any chance I get, if I get invited to a sales meeting or any kind of gathering of ideas, it's really nice for me.
Awesome. Well, at this point in the show, it's time to do something I call Inappropriate Questions. I get someone that you know to ask you 3 questions, and they can be anything. And this week I got HP, Heather Paul Featherman, a good friend of yours, a fellow K2 Alliance member, to ask the questions, and she really went all out. She crushed it on the questions. And her first question is going to kick off something that I call the Weedmaps Question of the podcast. Are you ready for question number 1?
Yes.
Hi, Kim. All right, here's question number 1. We could argue that we might be some of the best ski testers of all time. You can just ask us. It's all about the prep and mental mindset we strive to keep consistent throughout each and every test. What is our greatest edge?
I would say my greatest edge for ski testing as far as being an asset to K2 is to come into a test with as much knowledge as possible. To know the entire product line, to know every single ski we make, what goes inside them, how those skis perform differently, so that when we work with the engineers and we talk about some of the different skis in our collection, I'm speaking in terms that my engineers can relate to and understand, and therefore am an asset to the process of making skis.
That was not her inappropriate question, though. She was wondering what you and her secret weapon is when testing skis.
Oh, Really?
I mean, I'm just trying to decipher what her question was. I think that's what it was.
Oh, well, K2 has always been a real open-minded company. And there's some things that help you be more open-minded than others. And the most important thing about being open-minded and possibly enhancing that open-mindedness through some medication, the most important part about that is that you're consistent throughout the entire test.
Is that where the name Mindbender comes from? We can go into our next question there.
I forgot that these were inappropriate questions. Sorry.
That's all right. They get better.
I'm too serious.
Well, at least we figured out the real answer to that question. We will now jump into a few words from Weedmaps.
Weedmaps is exactly what it sounds like. It's simply the place to go online when it comes to finding what you need, so you have absolutely nothing to worry about. The cannabis market can be a bit of a treasure hunt, but Weedmaps will get you straight to the source with no worries. Whether you're seeking out the best locations, deals, doctors, or strains, we offer online ordering and delivery where legal. No need to waste your precious time searching elsewhere. Go to weedmaps.com or download the free app today. It's your ultimate guide to cannabis. Weedmaps.
That was Weedmaps, and if you don't have the Weedmaps app, you can find that at the App Store. Now let's jump into question number 2.
All right, Kim, you've been called many things, mostly good, the goddess of free skiing, and one of the most influential skiers of all time. They also say you have a mischievous grin, a penchant for foul language, and good-natured charm to flirt with anyone. I know what's behind the mischievous grin, and I fucking love your use of the English language, but I'd like to explore that flirtatiousness. Tell us about the best place or situation your crafty flirtatiousness has afforded you.
I like it. She went deep and thought about the question, how have you used your personality to get what you want?
Oh, good smile goes a long ways, Mike.
Not for me, but either way, I hear you.
So she's not like asking specifically about the Aspen gondola?
No, but I think we should hear the Aspen gondola story. Maybe she is. I don't know. She didn't tell me.
Oh, that's all you get.
Is his name Squirrel?
No squirrels in my life.
All right. Well, there was a scene that I'm sure you know from a movie. All right. Well, you don't have to tell us what happened in that Aspen gondola, but if the gondolas are rocking, don't come a knocking. We'll go to question number 3.
Okay, and my final question is, would you please explain the key ingredient to the Reichhelm approved approach to snorkeling?
Oh my gosh, she's just crushing me here.
And before you tell the story, because I've heard it once before, and when I heard it, we were at a dinner. It was a bunch of athletes. It was, I think, the Lexi DuPont was there, the Chris brothers, and a little kid named Burke Irving, who is now like 19 years old, and he's like on the U.S. ski team. And he was a little kid back then. His sister was Svea. She was like 3 or 4 years old, and now she's like going to be on the U.S. ski team. And their parents were there, and Burke's mom was a super fan of you. So when she got to go to this dinner, she was like telling me on the side, like, I can't believe we're going to go to dinner with Kim Reichhelm. I love Kim Reichhelm. I'm like, oh, it's great. She's awesome. It's going to be an amazing dinner. And then the Kim Reichhelm approved method of snorkeling came up at dinner, and I saw her face almost go white. And could you tell us what the method is?
Oh my God. I don't even, I had no idea.
That was great.
Whoops. Well, there's a couple. Mushrooms and or MDMA can be quite fabulous when it comes to snorkeling.
And is it something where you just do it for like 4 hours straight and just can't get enough?
The only hard part is that sometimes you go down deep and then you forget that you can't breathe.
Yeah.
It's not until you're like panicking without oxygen that you realize that you can't just breathe whenever you want. So you do kind of come up gasping for air sometimes. And the other thing that's really weird is like, as long as your face is in the water and you're looking at the fish and the coral and all the undersea world, it's fabulous. You're in a whole nother world. But sometimes when you look up and you see the other half of the world, you feel really like,
I got to get back in there.
Yeah, you don't feel safe. You're like, oh my God, I don't want to be out here. I need to be back down there. I need to be a fish.
All right. Well, that's amazing. And it's something everybody should try when they go snorkeling. I'm sure it's highly recommended for anyone. Kim, I want to thank you for your time. And I am just jealous of the life that you have led. I mean, everything has been kind of your own way with your own attitude towards it. But that's what's made it all work. I mean, with your business Ski with Kim, people want to go travel with you because you are so fun to be around. And you know so much stuff about what you know, especially. Like anything skiing, you can go anywhere in the world with you and you're going to be able to find the best and you're going to be able to create that environment that's so much fun. And I always enjoyed just having you around because I knew you weren't going to sugarcoat anything. And that was always funny to me as well. And yeah, it was always great seeing you. And I thank you for your time.
All right, pal. Thank you. It's a pleasure. You're a lovely person to talk with. You're very good at what you do.
So that was time with Kim Reichhelm. And what an amazing story. Kim is confident, she's outspoken, and she doesn't give a fuck. Or at least the old, aka younger Kim was like that. Because after this podcast, while Kim didn't ask me to pull anything that we talked about, I could tell that she was uncomfortable about saying some of what she did. And I was shocked that she would even think that way. I mean, sure, if Kim wasn't such a success, maybe those stories aren't as cool, but Kim has crushed almost every goal in her path. The only thing that ever got in her way, and it's still there at times, is that tree from License to Thrill. That's the podcast for this week. At this point, I want to ask you to review me wherever you listen to me. And if you do review me, I'm going to start reading my favorite and least favorite reviews on the show. And I'm going to start with one of the best or one of the worst, someone who doesn't like my language. And this review is from Upkill. It's an old review, but I think it's definitely relevant and I will share it. Upkill has to say, I really enjoy the interviews. However, I think you could be better served by illuminating the expletives. Hopefully you ask the guests before the interview if they're comfortable with them. Love the Glenn Plake interview. Well, I'm not sure what he meant by illuminating the expletives. I think he meant eliminating the expletives. But you know what? I don't give a fuck. I say bad words and I do that in life. And if a guest has a problem with my language and they bring it up, I won't say any bad words. I will take that into consideration and won't offend my guests. But if you're a listener and you don't like bad words, well, there's nothing I can do for you but recommend other podcasts. And there are some other great ones in the action sports world. If you want to know what they are, shoot me an email at mike@thepowellmovement.com and I will let you know my top podcasts outside of what I am doing. And you can go ahead and review them. But to review me, here is what you need to do. First, click the podcast icon on your iPhone. Next, search for The Powell Movement. Then click my logo. Scroll down to where you see the stars, give me 5 stars, and if you want to write a review, I may read it on the show. Please make it funny, interesting, really bad, however you want to make it. You know if it's going to get read or not by how you write it, I would think. Thank you for doing it, and thank you for listening, and please support my sponsors. Both Glade and Stanley have codes in their ads that will save you money on gear that you need. I've been loving my Glade goggles since day one, no fog and easy to change lenses. And Stanley, well, you should already know that that's the best stuff out there to parking lot it right at the mountain and really anywhere. I also want to thank Elan Skis for my amazing ripsticks, which I'm sure you can get over at Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and 10 Barrel Brewery and Weedmaps for fueling my lifestyle. Have a great week, everyone.